I'm Chuck Perden. I'm a member of the SNIA GSI, and this is one of those situations, no matter how many times you go around the block, you always find new cracks in the sidewalk. Well, as a result of us going through and adding some changes to the specification, the Emerald specification over time, there were a few things that were overlooked as we went through this last pass, as we went from the 3.0.1 to 3.0.2. So in particular, what we found was that there's some inconsistencies in the data collection intervals that were spelled out for the three metrics that we collect along the way. One is power, of course. One is I/O operations rate, and the other is temperature. And what I'd like to do is I'll spell out the sections here in the deck, but then as we go through here, we'll actually view the changes that were actually made to the specification. So there's a couple of clauses in the spec that need to be aligned, 7.2.9 and 7.2.12.2, and then tables at the end where these things are summarized. And in this particular case, it's tables B1 and B3. So next slide, please. So what we've decided to do here is to make these things as consistent as possible. Let me say up front, first of all, we have not made any changes at all to the block access data recording process. That's to preserve the backward compatibility with the testing that's already been done. So in order to align the file access recording process, we've decided on a 5-second interval for power, 10 seconds for I/O operations, and 10 seconds for temperature collection. I'll justify these in just a second. And again, we haven't changed anything on the block access data recording process. That remains the same. Next slide, please. Okay, and again, when we go to, and when Wayne brings up the spec, I'll actually show you what we changed. But and let me say up front that these tables at the outset have some assumptions in them that are maybe not intuitively obvious. There are different averaging periods for these power calculations in these tables. So although the data collection interval for the data recording interval for the power is on 5-second boundaries, these tables reflect a 60-second average, for example, for the power, a 10-second average for the file access power calculation. Okay, so they're different averaging windows. And this allows the number of data points. If you'll recall, back in the spec, we have this stability criteria that we've created, and we want a statistically significant number of points that are in that calculation. It turns out that if we leave the I/O rate collection at 60 seconds, as is in the case of the VD Bench workload generator on the block access, we only have 3 data points. That's a little on the weak side. So, next page, please. Okay, now if I may ask, Wayne, if you could bring up, before I go on, any questions or comments about what we've done here? We'll go through the details in just a second. Okay. If we could look at the first page of those, Wayne, that'd be appreciated. Thank you. Actually, the first 2 pages in this case. So essentially, the 2 clauses, if you recall, 7.2.9, this is where and I believe someone from DeMar Tech, and forgive me, I don't remember which one of the folks brought it up. It was Susan or Jennifer, I'm not sure, pointed this out to us when we went through the spec one time when we had one of the regular weekly meetings. And it turns out that this says that this power has to be collected and written to durable media no less than 5-second interval. So that's the reason we're not changing this part in the specification. This is something that remains. It's just that we wanted to spell out where this 5-second sample interval came from. So if we could kind of scroll down to the next highlighted section, it would be 7.2.11.2, I think. 7.2.11.2. Okay, this is one of the changes that we made, and the context of this clause is file access instrumentation. There is another corresponding clause that you'll see right above 7.2.11.1 for the block access. Again, we haven't changed anything in the specification related to the file access. Here we see that we're going to record the I/O throughput for the file access every 10 seconds. Again, that's to get us up to the 30-point data collection process for doing the stability calculation. Any questions so far? Okay, and then if we could please scroll down to tables B1. Very good, thank you. The table B1 is pertinent to the block access workload. You'll notice that the things that have changed here are not any of the intervals. It's just the headers that were at the top of the columns there. And the idea there was realizing that this is not a collection interval per se. This is the averaging intervals, as I mentioned earlier, where we average the power calculations, in this case, on 60-second boundaries. And that's consistent throughout all of the active and ready idle tests. And the temperature recording is as it stood earlier, 10 seconds. Okay, and then if we could please go down, ignore table B2 for now, because that's a virtual media. Table B3 is where we've incorporated the changes that I enumerated with respect to the file access data reduction and collection process. 10-second boundaries, that gets us 30 data points, because it's a 5-minute run through the active portion of the file access test. Any questions? This brings us into alignment a little bit closer between these two environments. However, again, remembering that the finer grained power values are needed in order to preserve the stability calculations for file access. Any questions? And if I recall, Wayne, I think you just stated at the outset that this has become, this is actually rolled into VO 3.0.2, and that has been bought off on by the technical council.
It's been approved. We didn't.
Okay.
We didn't get any money from them.
No. Yeah. The good part is you're in for a raise. The bad part is it's based on your base pay now. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for your attention. If there aren't any other questions on this, we can move to the next item on the agenda.